In the far future, the world was all about dungeons because portals of no origin suddenly appeared all over the globe. Beyond these portals are unknown territories, and inside the dungeons are traps obstructing movement. In addition, there are monsters and mysterious items that are found within the dungeons. Things like elixirs that are able to heal any wound, dragon horns that are harder than diamonds, and those who are able to obtain these items end up becoming wealthy. Because of this, people began job awakening. This set of people had their physical abilities improved and they wielded skills. At the same time, those who returned with loot found in the dungeons were called hunters. In the end, this gave birth to an economy that is centered around dungeons and aggressive meritocracy. Basically, anyone who awakened a high-ranked job automatically gained a high status and respect. There was no discrimination because dropouts from school or those with trash backgrounds, like our MC, Ninomiya Tsukasa, are all qualified for a life-changing path once they awaken a high-ranked job. It turns out that Ninomiya was able to awaken an S-rank Trapmaster job, which helps control traps within dungeons. Basically, dungeons are filled with traps, and whoever is able to control the traps automatically controls the dungeon. Ninomiya was excited and happy when he awakened the job 2 years ago because it was supposed to be the best day of his trash life. After awakening the S-rank job, he went for the hunter appraisal test in an attempt to get his hunter license. A dummy is placed in front of him, which he is expected to destroy in an attempt to show his skills. Ninomiya eagerly stretches his hand and tries his trap activation, but to his surprise, nothing happens. Ninomiya is confused, but he decides to try one more time, believing that there must have been a glitch. He tries it again, but nothing happens, leaving the examiner and the other prospect staring at him like he is a weirdo. The examiner asks him what he is doing, and he tries explaining to him that his power might only work inside dungeons where there are active traps. The examiner refuses to believe Ninomiya, claiming that he is a fraud who faked his rank because he is a delusional dude. Ninomiya screams at the examiner, telling him that his job really showed that he is S rank, but in the end, he can only try to convince the man, since no one else can view another person's status window. Desperate to prove himself, he tells the examiner to test his abilities in a dungeon so that they can be sure. The examiner replies that dungeons are pretty dangerous, and entry is not allowed unless there's been proof of combat power. This is basically why the hunter license is needed. Ninomiya then asks the examiner what he is supposed to do, and the examiner replies that dungeon exploration is not the only job available. Because of this, Ninomiya failed at his quest to become a hunter, and he ended up being a punching bag for hunters during their training session. Ninomiya faces extreme hardship because of his inability to become a hunter, and one of the hunters using him as a punching bag is a former classmate of his, who is now a hunter. The dude's name is Asanuma, and he is always venting his dungeon frustration on Ninomiya under the guise of training. Asanuma doesn't believe that Ninomiya is S-rank, and anytime Ninomiya tries to clear the air, he just gets kicked and punched. After one of the training sessions, Ninomiya reminds Asanuma of the promise he made. Apparently, Asanuma had promised to get him an escort permit, which is needed for non-hunters to enter dungeons if he managed to endure his beatings. Asanuma is shocked to see just how desperate Ninomiya is, and he tells him that he has one final test for him. He brings out a permit with his signature on it, but lets Ninomiya know that there is a price to pay for it. He assures him that the permit will be his if he can endure his attacks and those of the senior hunters in the room. It turns out that all the hunters Asanuma brought are the same dude who used to bully Ninomiya back when he was in school. Even though the whole thing is dangerous, Ninomiya has no choice but to accept, since he is desperate to enter the dungeon. He ends up getting beaten up and trashed by Asanuma and his friends, but he stays strong with the hope of getting the permit. In the end, Asanuma tears the permit, telling Ninomiya that he can't let him go just because he had hope. Asanuma then reveals his intention to crush whatever hope that Ninomiya has left. Enraged, Ninomiya tries to grab Asanuma, but Asanuma pulls out a knife using his skill and stabs Ninomiya in the hand. Asanuma and his guys end up walking away as they mock Ninomiya, urging him to give up on his dream of becoming a hunter. It finally dawns on Ninomiya that he was lied to by Asanuma. Apparently, escort permits can be granted by sponsors, but civilians contribute nothing in dungeons, and any injury or death becomes the sponsor's responsibility. It is considered a non-profitable path, which means it is not accessible unless a billionaire decides to pay an absurd fee just for the fun of it. Even though Ninomiya is aware that Asanuma would not keep his promise, he just had to keep hoping, because if he got the slightest chance to enter a dungeon, everything would change for the better. Ninomiya is on his way home, thinking about this when everything around him starts going to shit. Ninomiya is dumbstruck, and in no time a gate appears, causing even more destruction. Just then, the Hunter Association puts out an emergency alert, revealing that there has been a dungeon break worldwide. In a surprising turn of events, the entire world appears to have transformed into a dungeon with monsters crawling around and humans running helter-skelter so they don't die. Ninomiya initially panics, but it suddenly dawns on him that fate might have just smiled upon him, since his skill only works well in dungeons and he has been presented with the right environment to use it. Ninomiya wastes no time using his skill, and he activates the trap scan, waiting to figure out where all the traps in the area are located. Just as expected, he is able to pinpoint all of their locations, and Ninomiya's joy knows no bounds. He is glad that his prayers were finally answered and his powers were not fake in the end. Thanks to this, he can finally become the hunter that he has been craving for. Even though traps are created to frustrate hunters in the dungeon, Ninomiya doesn't have a problem because he knows all the locations where the traps are located. Ninomiya is mapping out the traps when he turns around to see an armored monster chasing down a mother and her child. He then picks up a rod with the confidence that he can finally defeat the monster thanks to his trapmaster's skill. The two are trying to escape when the son trips and falls, ultimately separating the mother and son. The monster gets a good chance at the boy, and just as it is about to crush the boy to death, Ninomiya jumps to block the sword with his rod. Ninomiya is excited about the whole situation as he tells the monster that he already has a trap in place to kill it. The monster tries to decapitate Ninomiya, but he dodges and changes position. He then throws the rod at the monster, but he misses. The monster mocks him for missing such an easy throw, but unknown to him, it is a setup. Unknown to him, there is a trap right behind him, and by throwing the rod into it, Ninomiya has activated it. The trap activates, which turns out to be an iron axe pendulum. This is a pendulum that wields an iron axe, and it attacks the prey within the field. Before the monster can get the chance to move, the pendulum crushes it to death. Ninomiya is excited when he sees this because he has finally found a way to fight monsters and defeat them using traps. Thanks to Ninomiya killing the monster, the little boy reunites with his mother. Some seconds later, a bunch of the armored monsters appear on the scene, and since Ninomiya can't deal with all of them at once, he thinks of using his skill. Just as the monsters dash toward him, he turns to his trap activation skill, and a boulder appears from above, crushing the monsters below. Apparently, the trap activation skill allows him to activate traps without touching them, but this consumes magical power. Because he successfully defeated the monsters, Ninomiya moved one level above. He also figured out that the more he moves, the more skills that he can learn. He is excited when he figures this out because he is finally getting the chance to use his S-rank job to its full potential. Just then, a group of people who witnessed Ninomiya defeating the monsters appeared from where they were hiding. They commend Ninomiya's bravery, believing that he is a skilled hunter. They ask him where they are supposed to go, and Ninomiya comes clean, revealing that he is not an official hunter, but he can find a safe area for them. Basically, there is always a safe zone within a dungeon where there are no traps and no worry of being attacked by monsters. However, the problem there is pinpointing the location of the safe area. The civilians remind him that this is always a problem, because a skilled team is usually dispatched to find a safe zone. However, Ninomiya urges them not to worry, because this is not a problem for him. Ninomiya then places his hand on the ground to activate the trap scan skill, which will help him to detect trap locations. By using this, he can locate the areas where there are no traps at all, which means it is a safe area. Ninomiya is able to detect this, and he tells the group to follow him because where they need to go is Higashikawa Park. With no one else to trust, the group rushes after Ninomiya, and he safely leads them to the safe zone, which has no monsters whatsoever. They jump in celebration because they are finally saved, and the woman and son from earlier thank Ninomiya because they would have been dead meat if not for him. Just then, Ninomiya dashes out of the safe zone back into the danger zone. Thanks to his skill, he figures out that a location where there are concentrated traps automatically means there is something good hiding there. As he runs toward the said area, he wonders what might be hidden there. He figures out that it might be a powerful hidden item, which will serve him a great purpose if he can get his hands on it. Ninomiya is close to his destination when he suddenly hears a familiar voice behind him. Ninomiya turns around, and fear grips him when he realizes that he has just been tracked down by the dreadful Asanuma. Asanuma notices Ninomiya's fear, and he asks him if he is also avoiding the monsters just like him, which is why he ended up in a place where there are no monsters. Without warning, Asanuma dashes toward Ninomiya with the rod in his hand, ready to smash his head with it. Ninomiya manages to dodge the first strike, and he screams out, asking Asanuma what he is doing. He reminds him that they are currently in an emergency situation, and it is not the time for them to pick a fight. Asanuma then replies that he doesn't care because the world has already gotten to shit, which means it is now the survival of the fittest. Asanuma mentions that he is now free to kill anyone who pisses him off because those with power rule the world. In his crazy philosophy, Asanuma reveals that he is curious to see if killing humans will raise his level. Without a doubt, Ninomiya can see that Asanuma has gone crazy. In addition, he notices that his latest movement is weird because it appears as if Asanuma was dodging the traps in the area, as if he could see them. Asanuma soon realizes that Ninomiya is confused about something, and he decides to tell him his little secret. Asanuma whips out a device, which is a trap searcher, revealing that this is what helped him. Basically, the trap searcher is not as accurate as Ninomiya's trap scan, but it helps to detect traps in the nearby area. In addition, the one Asanuma is holding is an expensive one, leaving Ninomiya to wonder where Asanuma found it, since he is a low-rank hunter. Asanuma continues running his mouth, revealing that he just got the item a moment ago. Apparently, he looted it from a hunter gear shop in town when the whole mess started. Asanuma believes that with the trap searcher, he is basically invincible, since he knows the location of every trap in the area. Since Ninomiya has found himself in this situation, he figures out that the only way to defeat Asanuma is to catch him off guard with a forced activation skill. It appears that there is a trap overhead, and Ninomiya uses his skill to activate the trap. A bunch of steel bars appear from above and crash into Asanuma. Asanuma falls to his knees, and Ninomiya smiles, believing that he's done it. Suddenly, he sees Asanuma getting back on his feet with no injury whatsoever. Asanuma laughs evilly, realizing that Ninomiya wasn't actually lying about being a trapmaster. Ninomiya cannot believe his eyes when he notices that there is a spark on Asanuma's back, which points to the fact that Asanuma has an invincible guard. The invincible guard is a special device that deploys a barrier around the hunter's body, which makes it a defensive barrier that protects the user. With this type of device, it is possible to prevent fatal attacks multiple times. Asanuma continues laughing, reminding Ninomiya that he looted a gear shop during the chaos, which was why he got his hands on the trap searcher and the invincible guard. Asanuma declares that with these two devices, he finally has a chance to join the ranks of high-tier hunters. Before Ninomiya knows what is happening, Asanuma dashes toward him and kicks him in the belly. Ninomiya crashes to the ground in pain, and Asanuma picks up a rod to beat Ninomiya up. He laughs like a maniac while beating Ninomiya, declaring that it is the start of his legend. Asanuma is pissed that he was not treated well by the association because he is a D-rank hunter. He wanted a chance to enter a high-level dungeon to show what he could do, but he didn't get the chance, and all of this makes him really angry. Just as before, he is taking out his anger on Ninomiya, and Ninomiya figures out that if he doesn't do something soon enough, he is going to get trashed. To defend himself, Ninomiya frantically activates a trap, but it doesn't affect Asanuma thanks to the device's help. However, Ninomiya continues running as he unleashes more traps in an attempt to get away from Asanuma. At some point, Ninomiya realizes that everything he is doing is not working because Asanuma can clearly see through his attacks, thanks to the trap searcher. To make it even worse, landing a hit on Asanuma would make no difference, since he has the invisible guard to protect him. With this, Ninomiya comes to the sad conclusion that he is out of moves. Suddenly, he gets the notification of a status change on his status window. The system informs him that he has acquired a new skill because he has achieved enough proficiency. It dawned on Ninomiya that he was able to get the new skill because he used the same technique repeatedly. He then unveils the new skill, which turns out to be trap creation. This is a skill that consumes magical power, but helps to generate new traps. With this, Ninomiya believes that he has a fighting chance against Asanuma. Ninomiya wastes no time getting into the perfect position to use his new skill, and Asanuma is pissed that Ninomiya is standing in a weird position. Ninomiya then replies that he is about to show him the power of his skill. Ninomiya activates the new skill, and out of nowhere, a massive log appears in front of Asanuma. Fear grips him as he wonders where a trap came from. With no time to react, the log hits him hard, sending him backwards. Ninomiya smiles really hard because his new skill worked well. He is glad that with this skill, he can now win the fight. He decides to activate the trap one more time, and when Asanuma sees this, he screams out in fear. He starts questioning how trash like Ninomiya can create traps out of nowhere. Ninomiya then walks up to him, telling him that he is not like him because he is an S-rank job trap master. To further prove that he is way above Asunuma's level, Ninomiya activates the skill again, and something drops from above. Asanuma holds his head in fear, but when the item lands on the ground, it turns out to be a bucket, and it basically does no damage. Asanuma is shocked when he sees this, but Ninomiya quickly figures out that his current power level has limited what he can create. If he is aiming to create large-scale attacks, he would need loads of magical power. Just as expected, Asanuma started mocking Ninomiya, asking him if the bucket was the major thing that he could create using his trash ability. Since this is the case, Asanuma believes that he has nothing to fear, but Ninomiya replies, telling him that the bucket was just a distraction. Ninomiya then tells him to take a look at what is around his feet, and this is when it dawns on Asanuma that Ninomiya tricked him into falling into a trap that was already there. Before Asanuma knows it, a racing saw emerges from underneath and comes straight at him. He screams in fear, but thanks to the guard around his body, the saw is not able to penetrate. Asanuma immediately changes location, but before he can rest, another trap emerges from behind. A wall of needles shoots straight at Asanuma, forcing him to start running around. Before he knows it, he has fallen into another trap again. This forces him to dash around with the realization that his invisible guard will soon break if he continues falling into traps. Just when Asanuma thinks he is safe, a trap appears from above, which happens to be lightning. This strikes Asanuma, and in no time, he realizes that he has reached his limit. He figures out that one more hit will finish him off. He hasn't finished thinking about this when he realizes that he is standing in another trap. This time around, it is an unbreakable chain, and it immediately seizes Asanuma. With Asanuma incapacitated, Ninomiya walks up to him, telling him that the room contains a trap combo, but he didn't notice this. Basically, a trap combo is a mechanism designed to repel intruders with a high level of durability because the traps activate one after the other. Ninomiya then tells him that he is currently sitting in the final stage of the trap combo, and suddenly a large bolt appears from above. Asanuma screams out in fear, begging for someone to help him because he is not ready to die yet. The bolt hits, but fortunately for Asanuma, his invincible guard holds up just one last time, but shatters after the bolt hits. Asanuma then crashes to the ground, totally exhausted and at Ninomiya's mercy. Ninomiya concludes that there is no need for him to finish Asanuma off, since the guard is already destroyed. However, Ninomiya makes sure to destroy the trap searcher. Ninomiya tells Asanuma that he was defeated because of his inability to notice the trap combo, which led to him wasting the invisible guard. After defeating Asanuma, Ninomiya walks to the treasure that he was originally looking for. He takes a quick glance at the chest, and the system informs him that it is an ultra-rare class, which is S rank. Because the items are always rare and hidden, they always hold high value. In fact, they are so valuable that they can instantly transform the power of whoever holds them. The moment Ninomiya opens the chest, he finds himself levitating with his magic status rapidly increasing, leaving him to wonder if he has just found an item that grants a massive magic boost. Due to his lack of magical power, he hasn't been able to create large-scale traps, but with the item that he just found, everything seems to have changed. It turns out that the item he found is the Orb of the Archmage, and it helped Ninomiya's magical power move from 7 to 27. With the amount of magic power that he now has, Ninomiya is confident that he can generate powerful traps. Excited with his new skill, he decides to try it out. He finds a bunch of large insect-type monsters, which are the perfect opponents for what he wants. Ninomiya wastes no time activating the trap creation skill, which creates the Inferno Burner that scorches prey within the target area. Just one push from the Inferno Burner wipes out the insect monsters and roasts them down to the bone. Just then, two dudes appear on the scene, and Ninomiya quickly hides. The two are shocked to see such powerful monsters taken down, and without a doubt, they figure out that whoever did it is an S-rank hunter. Ninomiya remains in hiding as he watches the two. Apparently, they are from the Hunter Association's defense force, and Ninomiya believes that they are there to evacuate the residents. Moments later, another dude shows up, telling his friends that they need to move to the baseball stadium because the main unit found the area boss monster. Apparently, their new plan is to hit the boss with everything they have. Ninomiya is surprised when he hears that the hunters have found the boss already. Basically, an area boss stands at the pinnacle of dungeon monsters, which makes them pretty strong monsters to go against. However, they are also the priority that target hunters must strike, because once an area boss is defeated, all the other monsters within the same area will vanish immediately, and the entire area can then be used as a safe zone. Excited about the whole thing, Ninomiya decides that he has to take a look too. Meanwhile, the hunters in the boss area have not encountered the boss, but the monsters that they are facing are already giving them a tough time. Moments later, the boss monster shows up and announces its arrival with a heat ray attack. The leader of the hunters team then screams at his fellow hunters to evacuate the stadium because the boss is coming in. However, the team leader ends up being unlucky as the rubble from the monster's arrival traps him and kills him. One of the hunters, who is a lady, concludes that they are done for because the monster is way above their level. Meanwhile, Ninomiya is already rushing toward the stadium, and he is excited to take on the monster because he already set a trap for it. Ninomiya is determined to take down the boss monster because this will ultimately put an end to all the fighting in the area. The fight between the boss monster and the hunters continues to intensify as the artillery squad aims everything they have at the monster to try and subdue it. The attack from the hunters leaves a loud explosion that gives the hunters the impression that they have taken down the monster. However, when the smoke clears out, the boss monster is still standing. It turns out that the monster has the auto-recovery skill, which instantaneously heals any minor damage taken by the monster. Seeing this, Ninomiya figures out that the hunters are in a mess because all of their attacks are useless, since the monster can easily recover unless a single fatal blow is landed. Even though Asanuma's invisible guard was a pain to deal with, Ninomiya believes that the monster's ability to heal is even more troubling since it doesn't accumulate damage. Nonetheless, Ninomiya is convinced that he can still take down the monster, since it doesn't appear to be a monster that he can't deal with. Ninomiya is thinking of what to do when the lady hunter screams at the monster to get its attention. Even though the lady hunter is scared, she plans to use herself as a decoy to give the others a chance to escape. However, the boss monster doesn't play around, and it immediately unleashes a heat beam without hesitation. Seeing this, the lady hunter concludes that she is dead. She closes her eyes, waiting for death, and by the time she opens them, she is surprised to see Ninomiya carrying her just like a princess in distress. The lady looks around to see that she is in a safe place, and she demands to know where they are. Ninomiya replies that he saved her with a warp magic trap right before the heat beam landed. Basically, a warp trap is one that suddenly appears in dungeons and warps the target to an unintended location. It is considered to be a troublesome trap, but if manipulated at will, it can be used for emergency rescues, just like Ninomiya did. It is basically an effective way to use a non-offensive trap. The lady is surprised and confused at the same time, causing her to ask Ninomiya who he is. Ninomiya lets her know that he would have loved to explain, but he really doesn't have the time. Ninomiya prepares to leave, but he tells the lady hunter to inform her peers that he will engage the boss monster alone. It turns out that his plan is to drive the monster into the city, but the lady hunter objects to this. She argues that they intentionally lured away the boss monster to prevent civilian casualties. Ninomiya then tells her that the evacuation in the city is complete already, which means the city is available to be used as a battlefield. Without saying anything further, Ninomiya runs off, leaving the lady hunter in a confused state. Meanwhile, the hunters are still having a hard time subjugating the boss monster, thanks to its incredible recovery skill. The hunters are scared that they might actually die at this point, but suddenly a wash basin falls on the boss monster. It is well known that this is a humiliation ritual, and it turns out that Ninomiya is the one who dropped the item on the monster to get its attention. Ninomiya teases the monster, urging it to come after him if he is really the boss. Provoked, the boss cooks up another heat beam, ready to roast Ninomiya. The other hunters are worried when they see this, because Ninomiya is basically pushing the monster to go rampage. Surprisingly, Ninomiya dodges the attack, shocking the hunters. One of them believes that Ninomiya possesses a flight skill, but the experienced hunter is able to see what happened. It turns out that Ninomiya leaped into the air using a springboard trap. Basically, the dude is right because Ninomiya used a non-offensive trap, the springboard, to instantly evade the heat beam. Ninomiya figures out that he can jump freely if he uses the trap at will. It is basically a trap that helps in aerial combat. Ninomiya continues activating the trap until he finds himself on top of the boss monster to properly provoke it. Once he has gotten the monster's attention, Ninomiya heads to the city so that the monster can follow him, ultimately falling into the custom trap that he has already laid out. Just as Ninomiya wanted, the boss monster chases after him relentlessly. The hunters then pass the information across to the others that the monster has completely gone out of control, and it is now heading toward the power substation. At some point, the monster almost catches up to Ninomiya, but fortunately for him, he activates the warp trap to evade at the last minute, thus escaping death. Ninomiya is glad that he has managed to lure it far, but he still needs to get the monster to where he left his big setup. Ninomiya then decides to show the boss monster a different type of hell as they approach the custom-made trap. The first thing he does is create a large, unbreakable chain to try to resist the monster's movement. Once the monster is restrained, Ninomiya hits it with the iron axe pendulum, causing the monster pain. Ninomiya doesn't stop there as he creates a large racing saw to cut the monster. Ninomiya is not surprised that the monster is not dead yet, even though everything he just threw at it is an instant death trap. He knows that the monster is way above ordinary monsters, and killing it would require something really crazy. Ninomiya continues with the incessant attack, as he hits the monster with falling rocks, and combines this with the Inferno Burner. Ninomiya is enjoying the moment as he mocks the monster, asking if it is having a good time. Thanks to the rocks and the high level of fire, the monster is cornered, forcing it to fly to the sky. However, Ninomiya already expected this, and he had already put something in place for the monster. Just as the monster reaches where he wants, Ninomiya activates the trap. A lightning spear immediately appears from above and pierces the monster's body. The lightning spear turns out to be the largest-scale offensive trap in the area, and Ninomiya was already aware of this from the very first time he used trap scan right after the dungeon break. With the lightning spear stuck in the monster's body, it tries to attack Ninomiya out of desperation and pain, but Ninomiya uses the springboard to dodge. It turns out that Ninomiya has another thing in stock for the monster, and he creates the iron axe pendulum to destroy the nearby power tower, causing a surge. Apparently, the lightning spear stuck in the monster's body is also part of Ninomiya's plan. The lightning spear interacts with the power surge, ultimately becoming a boss kill level devastating blow. The monster screams in pain as a high level of lightning and electricity runs through the monster's body. The monster's body basically turns into an electric conductor as it burns into charcoal. Ninomiya knows that the whole thing would not work if it were a normal dungeon. He is honest enough to admit that he would not be able to take on the boss with his own strength. However, thanks to the fact that there is a transmission tower in the area, Ninomiya is able to use it to create an unexpected trap. Ninomiya lets the monster know that it was already in a bad situation from the very start. With the defeat of the boss, the dungeon ultimately becomes cleared, and Ninomiya sees a 4-point increase in his level. Ninomiya is proud that he was able to single-handedly clear a dungeon by himself after undergoing immense suffering for the past 2 years. In these 2 years, Ninomiya spent his time accumulating knowledge about dungeons, even though he had no chance of entering them. Ninomiya even caused his family to worry so much about him, being the only one who believed in him. His sister and mother tried to discourage him from his quest to become a hunter because of how dangerous it is. But Ninomiya refuses, revealing that he is never going to give up. Now that the boss has been defeated and the monsters in the area have vanished, Ninomiya sets his eyes on the Hunter Association base. He makes his way into the building, which is a communication base, but malfunctioned due to the dungeon break. However, with the dungeon gone, Ninomiya believes that all communication should have been restored. He manages to locate the communication room, and using one of his trap skills, he disables the lock on the door. Ninomiya is impressed by how well laid out the communication room is. He is also glad that the computers and other machinery appear to be working fine. He tries to access the security cameras, and he is relieved to see that he can without fingerprint authentication. He then reboots the entire system to get it back to normal after the communication failure. Once the system comes back online, it starts scanning the entire area. The system soon gathers info on the area, and it displays its analysis, revealing that the dungeon that was cleared is an A-rank dungeon. Ninomiya is shocked to see that the area he just cleared had such a high level of difficulty. After this, the system starts analyzing other important areas in the domestic region. Ninomiya is relieved to see that the system is actually analyzing information from other areas too. Basically, an area is a specific territory within a dungeon, and it refers to fields which are divided by the city. However, the sudden evolution of the whole world into a dungeon has caused countless areas to surface. Ninomiya cannot believe that the system is actually trying to analyze everything, given how much they are. It then dawns on Ninomiya that he might actually be able to map out the divisions of the entire world using the system. The system gets down to this, but soon stops, displaying system error information because measurement is impossible. The system tells Ninomiya that region data acquisition is only possible for a 100-kilometer radius. Ninomiya figures out that the volume of data is too massive, which is why the system couldn't process it. Even though he can't get information on the whole world, Ninomiya is content with knowing what is going on in the surrounding region. Since his mother and sister live in separate places, he decides to check on what is happening in their respective areas. Ninomiya is mostly concerned about the danger levels of each area. By the time the system is done computing the data, Ninomiya almost shits his pants to find out that all the areas are rated A rank. Fear grips Ninomiya because he believes that the whole area might have fallen to the monsters. Just then, he takes a closer look at the information on the system, and he finds out that the areas are still active, which means that they have not fallen. Ninomiya is also relieved that some of the areas have been cleared and communication has been restored. Ninomiya is blown away to see that there are other strong hunters out there who are clearing out the affected areas one after the other. It then dawns on Ninomiya that he has to check his family's safety first. The first place he checks is Sugidatsu, where his mother resides. Thankfully, the area has been cleared and the network is up and running. He figures out that he should be able to contact her, and he immediately dials her contact. Fortunately, the call connects, and Ninomiya asks his mother if she is fine, and she assures him that the hunters showed up and got things under control. His mother asks him about his own area, and Ninomiya lets his mother know that he is fine. Just then, he asks his mother if she has been able to reach his sister, Shiori. The woman reveals that the call to Shiori connected just once, but it cut off immediately because of signal interference. Before hanging up, Ninomiya urges his mother to stay safe and not move from where she is. Since his mother is safe already, Ninomiya figures out that the only one he has to worry about is his sister. He remembers that his sister is living at her school ward, which is somewhere around the West Ward. He immediately checks out the West Ward, and he realizes that it hasn't been cleared yet, but he is not surprised, since the communication is not yet back up. Suddenly, a special report comes on, and it appears to be from the local hunters in the West Ward area. They reveal that they have taken complete control of the district, even though the boss monster is still active. In a video recording, the hunters declare their independence from the outside world, claiming that the citizens of the West Ward area are now independent. Ninomiya cannot believe his eyes when he sees this because his sister is basically trapped as it is. Suddenly, he hears people arriving at the door, and to avoid detection, he activates another trap skill to help him. In no time, Ninomiya is thrown to the building's rooftop thanks to the confusion jump skill that he used. He is glad that he escaped, but at the same time, he has figured out that his magical power is drained, and the trash trap is his limit. He remembers that the orb increased his magical stats, which also means his maximum capacity has increased. It is common knowledge that consecutively creating traps consumes energy, and thanks to his fight with the boss monster, his magic is on the verge of running out. Ninomiya comes to the conclusion that he has to level up more and increase his mana capacity. Just then, he gets a call from his sister and prays that the girl is safe wherever she is. He answers the call, but the interference makes it hard to hear what she is saying. Ninomiya asks Shiori if she is fine, and she replies that she is good, telling him not to worry about her because she is safe. She hasn't finished saying this when the call drops. Ninomiya is totally confused, since the area hasn't been cleared yet, but his sister is claiming that it is safe. In addition to this, the message from the hunter earlier is concerning. With all the factors in play, Ninomiya figures out that it would be stupid of him to leave his sister unattended. He decides that he has to confirm his sister's safety himself, and to do this, he has to replenish his mana first. Later on, he sneaks into the supply section of the evacuation center set up by the hunters, and he steals some mana recovery potions. Since it is going to be distributed to hunters later, Ninomiya sees no issue taking from it. In addition, he is going to work hard to pay for it. After drinking the potion, his mana fully recovers, and Ninomiya is glad that he has solved the issue of mana depletion. However, he still has to get to the West Ward area from the central area where he is currently located. To get there, he has to cross two other areas, which are Kawabi Ward and Iwaya Ward. To make the situation even more difficult, these two areas have not been cleared yet. Without a doubt, he realizes that it is going to be a journey filled with monster fighting, but he has no choice. However, he is worried if he can clear the two areas with his current level of strength. He figures out that it would be bad for him if he ends up going solo against another monster boss because his mana might just run dry. To prevent this, Ninomiya concludes that he is going to level up his mana capacity. Ninomiya then concludes that he is going to push forward while also leveling up his skills. With this, Ninomiya begins his first mission as a hunter, which is dungeon crossing. In a quick revelation, it turns out that monsters can cross from the affected area into already cleared regions, making it a continuous battle against monsters. Moments later, Ninomiya arrives at the Kawabi Ward, and Ninomiya prepares himself because monsters might just appear at any time. Just then, he runs into two dudes who appear to be hunters. The two walk over to Ninomiya asking him if he has any rare items because there are monsters ahead and they have nothing. Ninomiya calmly replies that he has nothing on him, and the moment he says this, one of them immediately brandishes his weapon, which is a claw. The two tell him that they plan to take whatever he has by force. Suddenly, Ninomiya is attacked, and he barely escapes being decapitated by the claw. Surviving the first attack quickly tells Ninomiya that he is up against bandits. The two still charge at him, but Ninomiya activates his trap skill, bringing down a huge weight on the two. With the two restrained, Ninomiya is left to decide whether he wants to kill them or not. He is curious to see if he is going to earn points just like when he defeats monsters. Since the possibility of this isn't zero, it dawns on him that he has to keep an eye on hunters who have become violent. Ninomiya concludes that his only prey will be monsters and not humans. To do this, he has a plan in mind that he wants to try out. Later on, Ninomiya finds a bunch of monsters causing chaos in the area. Ninomiya then catches their attention with the whistle doll, which is a doll that blows a whistle to lure in monsters. Just as expected, the monsters in the area gather around the doll. Ninomiya is not completely pleased that the monsters are only 4 in number, which is not enough for what he wants. Nonetheless, he activates his trap cage to keep the 4 inside. Once he's locked them in the cage, he decides that it is time to try out a new skill. He activates the Copy Mirror skill, which is a mirror that reflects and multiplies monsters. Under normal circumstances, it is a dangerous trap, but since the monsters are trapped, it provides the best avenue for Ninomiya to carry out his plan. Just as he wanted, the monsters keep multiplying inside the cage, but Ninomiya leaves them, waiting for the cage to be completely full. This is basically because the more monsters he defeats, the more experience he gains. Ninomiya plans to take down all of the monsters at once so he can become even stronger. The moment the cage becomes full to the extent that Ninomiya wants, he activates the Disaster Weight skill. A large weight appears and then crushes the monsters, ultimately annihilating them. Ninomiya is proud of his ingenuity, and he decides that he is going to call the cage the Experience Cube because it allows him to defeat hundreds of monsters. To his surprise, the amount of level up he gains from defeating the monsters is insane, and he even gains a new skill in the process. The new skill is named Trap Domination, which allows Ninomiya to control trapped monsters, and Ninomiya's face lights up in shock when he sees this. From what he can see, it means he can make monsters his allies, which is basically broken. Just then, he spots one of the monsters that survived his attack earlier, and he decides to try out the new skill. He immediately fires the skill at the wounded monster, but to his surprise, the spell bounces back. He is initially confused, but he soon realizes that it only works on trap monsters. These are basically monsters that are related to traps, and not ordinary monsters like the one Ninomiya is trying to use it on. Since the wounded monster is not of use to him, Ninomiya finishes it off with the finisher sword. Ninomiya then concludes that it is time he scans the area and continues toward his sister's location. Ninomiya places his hand on the ground, and he scans the entire area with his skill. He suddenly notices that there is an area that is densely packed with traps, which means something important is being stored there. He takes a closer look and figures out that the building in question is a museum. Surprisingly, there is a long underground passage beneath the museum. With this discovery, Ninomiya figures out that his next step is the museum. He soon runs into a huge lake in the middle of nowhere, but he ignores the lake since he is already seeing the museum in front. Ninomiya wastes no time stepping into the museum, and since he has scanned the area prior, he knows that the whole area is packed with traps. Ninomiya figures out that moving slowly will be the best choice, so he doesn't get caught by one of the traps. Suddenly, Ninomiya turns his attention to the fake treasure sitting in the corner, and he uses the trap domination skill on it. Surprisingly, the skill works, and Ninomiya is glad that he trusted his instinct. Basically, the monster is one that mimics a treasure chest, and whoever approaches it gets attacked. This makes the monster unique and different from ordinary monsters. Ninomiya was not caught off guard because he already knew it was there when he scanned the building. Nonetheless, Ninomiya is glad that the domination skill worked because the monster is going to become his ally. Suddenly, the treasure monster starts acting weird, and it dashes toward Ninomiya, leaving him to wonder if the skill didn't work. Before he knows it, the treasure monster lunges at him, pushing him to the ground. Before he starts panicking, he realizes that the monster was only playing with him, just like a kid does around adults. Ninomiya is surprised to see that the monster is getting attached to him. Even though the whole thing looks really creepy, Ninomiya is glad that the trap domination worked. Since he has confirmed the authenticity of his new skill, he figures out that it is time to head to the underground passage. Upon stepping into the passage, Ninomiya is blown away by how large the passage is. He figures out that the space was most likely created when the district became a dungeon because there is no way on Earth that something that huge existed initially. He also knows that these kinds of spaces are created with a purpose in mind. It's either created as a shortcut to avoid monsters above ground, or something else. Since Ninomiya is not entirely sure, he prays that he is not wrong, so he doesn't end up becoming monster food. However, he can see that the road is packed with danger, which is payment for taking a shortcut. Before continuing his journey, he decides to name the treasure monster, and he gives it the name Mimi. Surprisingly, Mimi likes the name, and she jumps up in excitement. Ninomiya is pleased that Mimi likes the name, and he urges her to be careful because there is danger ahead. Mimi ultimately bows to Ninomiya, assuring him that he is prepared to help him out. With this, the two proceed to the next room, and as Ninomiya opens the door, he finds a statue standing in the middle of the room. Ninomiya is surprised that the only thing in the room is the statue, and behind it is the door that leads to the next room. Ninomiya casually walks toward the statue, but just as he is about to walk past the statue, she comes to life and attacks Ninomiya. However, Ninomiya manages to create a stone wall just in time to protect himself from losing his head. Ninomiya had already suspected that the statue was a trap monster. Basically, it is a bronze statue that turns into a monster when one gets close to it. Before entering, Ninomiya's scan had already shown that there was a dangerous monster in the room. Since he can't use domination on her while she was still a statue, Ninomiya intentionally walked close to her to force a transformation. Now that the statue is active, she is after Ninomiya. She appears behind Ninomiya and almost cuts him, but he is able to block the attack yet again. Ninomiya is forced to jump backwards with the realization that the statue is quite strong. In addition, the statue is fast, and she is also combining her erratic movements with her speed to aim for Ninomiya's blind spot. Just as he suspected, the statue appears right behind him and almost cuts him, but Ninomiya is able to protect himself yet again. It then dawns on Ninomiya that he has no reason to fight the statue head-on since she is a trap monster. Ninomiya decides that he is going to use the trap domination on the statue to make her his ally. Ninomiya then fires the first shot, and it hits her on the head, but nothing happens, leaving Ninomiya confused. He starts wondering if his magic was nullified, but it soon dawns on him that his skill level is too low. Apparently, he hasn't built up enough proficiency with the new skill yet, and unlike Mimi, who is a low-level monster, the statue will take more than that to fall. Ninomiya immediately concludes on his next plan of action, which is to continue hitting the statue with the trap domination spell until it eventually works. Ninomiya fires another shot, but this time around, he misses because the statue is too fast. This is when he finally realizes that the first shot that landed was a fluke, but Ninomiya figures out that he might have a chance if he is able to read the statue's path and patterns. Momentarily, the statue vanishes, and Ninomiya sets up a trap, hoping to flush it out. In the process of doing this, the statue appears behind him. She's about to cut him down when Ninomiya's trap, which is a wash tub, activates. This ends up pouring water on the statue, and Ninomiya only succeeds in making the statue even angrier. She frantically swings her sword at Ninomiya, but he dodges, and he can clearly see that the statue is angrier than before. However, Ninomiya now has a chance of tracking the statue's movements thanks to the water. With the trail of water, Ninomiya starts aiming for where the statue is headed. Ninomiya continues firing his trap domination skill, hoping to take down the statue and make her his ally. Moments later, Ninomiya hasn't succeeded, but he is not ready to give up because he is hell-bent on making the statue his ally. Meanwhile, Mimi is hiding behind a wall, and she is worried that Ninomiya might die. Not long after this, Ninomiya realizes that he is about to run out of mana, which means he has just one more shot left for the trap domination. This leaves him wondering if he has what it takes to do it. Just then, the statue starts running toward him, and with no choice left, Ninomiya bets his life on the last shot of the domination trap that he has. Ninomiya puts everything he has into the shot, and he fires it straight at the statue while screaming that it works. Just as the statue is about to reach him, the last shot hits her, and she suddenly comes to a full stop. Ninomiya is shocked to see this, leaving him to wonder if his technique later worked. He then notices that the statue's killing intent is already vanishing, and before he knows it, he realizes that the spell might have worked. Just then, the statue falls to her knees, calling Ninomiya her master and apologizing for her insolence. Ninomiya is shocked to see the monster talking, and he figures out that it is a special monster capable of conversing with humans. Ninomiya then tells her to reveal who she is. Surprisingly, the monster takes off her helmet to reveal her stunning white hair and beautiful face. She replies to Ninomiya's question, telling him that she is no one in particular. She reveals that she is just a nameless servant, and Ninomiya is required to give her a name so she can continue to be in his service. Since she looks like a female knight, Ninomiya decides to name her Jean. Jean appreciates the name, and she lets Ninomiya know that she is grateful for it. Once the naming ritual is done, Mimi comes rushing over to Jean to assert her dominance. Jean quickly assures her that she has no intention of taking her place as the senior in the team. In fact, Jean assures Mimi that she is looking forward to her guidance. Ninomiya is surprised to see the two arguing, and it dawns on him that monsters even have a hierarchy of their own. Ninomiya then tells the two that it is time for them to move forward. However, Jean urges him to wait, telling him that the next event is the battle with the area boss. Jean reveals that the area boss was sleeping before, but it has come to life. Ninomiya is stunned when he hears this, and he demands clarification. Jean then reveals that she is the gatekeeper of the dungeon. Apparently, the moment she transformed for battle, a signal was sent to the area boss to start preparing too. Jean lets him know that the battle is completely unavoidable because it is impossible to leave the dungeon without defeating the area boss. Ninomiya is shocked to hear that a battle with the area boss is totally mandatory. He realizes that he is in a deep mess because he thought he picked the easiest route. Without thinking twice, he suggests that they turn back so that they can go above ground instead. However, Jean lets him know that this is also impossible. Jean reveals that the door can no longer be moved by human strength because the moment he progressed, there was no turning back again. Jean informs him that the only way out is through the boss's chamber. Ninomiya then cuts in, telling Jean that he can't possibly take on an area boss as it is because he is out of mana. Just then, Ninomiya notices that Mimi is trying to reach out to him. Surprisingly, Mimi pulls out a mana recovery potion from her storage space. Ninomiya is surprised to find out that Mimi has such a perk, and he wastes no time gulping up the potion. Ninomiya believes that he is fully ready for the boss fight, but Jean lets him know that recovering is basically useless if he doesn't have the water magic attribute. Basically, the area boss that they are about to go up against is a reincarnation of fire itself. It is basic knowledge that to defeat such a monster, one would need to gather several high-level water magic users and hit it with a massive water attack all at once. With this realization, Ninomiya believes that he is screwed, since he has no water attribute whatsoever. However, he takes a minute to think of a plan, and in no time, he comes up with something. Since he can't go back via the door that he came in through, he asks Jean if a monster can do it, and Jean says yes. Ninomiya is still cooking up his plan when the whole room starts to shake. Jean reveals that the area boss is already tired of waiting, which is why it has decided to take the fight to them. Jean urges Ninomiya to put up a defensive spell because the scorching flames are approaching. Before they know it, everything erupts in a big mess, and they find themselves surrounded by scorching flames, which are capable of burning anything and everything to ash. The amount of firepower coming from the area boss leaves Ninomiya scared because he hasn't witnessed something as scary as this before. The entire room starts coming apart, but Ninomiya is able to protect himself and his companions from harm. After everything finally calms down, the boss presents itself, and it looks really deadly to say the least. It finally dawns on Ninomiya that all the rooms they have passed through were just a path leading directly to the boss. Realizing that staying in the room is only putting them at more risk, Ninomiya concludes that they have to get out as fast as they can. Ninomiya then tells Mimi that he has a request for her, and she has to act on her own once he passes on the information. Ninomiya then kneels beside Mimi to convey the information to her. Ninomiya is in the middle of this when the area boss attacks them. Ninomiya and his team are forced to engage in an evasive maneuver. Ninomiya engages the springboard, helping him to escape the boss's attack. By the time he turns around, he realizes that Mimi is already heading toward the door that they came through. Fortunately, Mimi is able to go through the door, since she is a monster. Ninomiya prays that Mimi gets everything right because everything relies on her. Ninomiya then runs toward the boss and he creates a warp hole behind him. This is a discharge port where anything can be discharged. Just then, the boss decides to launch his second wave of attack, but Jean cuts down the attack to save her master. Ninomiya thanks Jean for the help, and he lets her know that there is no need to help him evade again. Ninomiya reveals his plan to act as a decoy, while Jean aims for the boss's leg and attacks it to restrict the boss's movements. Ninomiya wants Jean to pin down the boss right under the warp hole that he created, and Jean immediately swings into action. With Jean in action, Ninomiya prays that Mimi comes through because everything falls back to her. He had told her to exit the museum and run straight to the forest, where she would find a lake. On the surface, Mimi had found the lake, and she wasted no time jumping into the lake. Meanwhile, Ninomiya is making sure that he keeps the boss focused on him. Moments later, Jean is able to find an opening, and she makes the most of it. She cuts the boss's leg, ultimately forcing it on one leg. Ninomiya is pleased Jean managed to pull it off because the boss is now under the warp, which means the rest of the plan rests on Mimi. It turns out that he had planted the other end of the warp hole in Mimi's treasure chest before she left. The moment this is placed at the bottom of the lake and it connects with the discharge port that Ninomiya has set up, it's game on. Suddenly, the area boss feels water dropping on him, and when he turns around, he sees a stream of water pouring out of the warp hole. Basically, all the water from the lake is coming down on him at once. As the water keeps pouring in, Ninomiya urges Jean to stand behind him so he can create a wall to stop them from getting washed away. Ninomiya quickly creates a prison wall that blocks intrusion from the outside. Ninomiya is glad that everything worked out well. Basically, to defeat the boss area under normal circumstances would require an entire unit of hunters who are capable of water magic. Since there was no way to generate water from the ground up, Ninomiya had no choice but to tell Mimi to head to the lake while he set up a portal. This basically allowed the water to flow out all at once. With the boss trapped under the water, his core became visible, and Jean tells Ninomiya to take the chance to destroy it. Ninomiya then uses the finisher longsword to deal the finishing blow, ultimately finishing off the monster. Just then, Mimi washes down the portal with the rest of the water, and Ninomiya rushes over to her, commending her for a job well done. Ninomiya is still thanking her when a sword suddenly falls down too. Ninomiya is surprised to see a sword clad in magic standing in front of him. He is initially confused, but Jean urges him to take the sword because it is the area's hidden item. Ninomiya is blown away when he hears this, since this type of item is super rare and it is extremely hard to find. Jean reveals that the sword was probably hidden at the bottom of the lake and it came down with the current. Ninomiya then follows Jean's advice, and he grabs the sword, pulling it out of the ground. This releases a massive wave of energy, and the status window reveals that the sword's name is the Sword of Mystic Light. Apparently, it is a sword that contains unseen power, but the special effect remains hidden. Since Ninomiya has no idea what the sword does, he figures out that he has to use it to find out. Suddenly, the room is hit with a tremor, scaring the hell out of Ninomiya. However, Jean urges Ninomiya to calm down, telling him that the tremor is just a sign that they have defeated the area boss. Basically, the underground is now shifting for them, and before they know it, the path to the next area opens in front of them. Ninomiya follows the path, and he is the first to emerge from a manhole located at the border of Kawabi and Iwaya wards. Ninomiya figures out that they are going to make it to Iwaya ward in no time. Even though a lot has happened, he is glad that they made it that far. Jean is about to emerge using the manhole when Ninomiya hears a bunch of hunters making their way toward him. He quickly tells Jean to return underground because he doesn't want the hunters to see him with a monster. The hunters soon make it to where Ninomiya is, and they demand to know what he is doing in such a dangerous place. Ninomiya scratches his head in confusion, but with a quick look, he figures out that the group is the association's rescue team. Suddenly, a voice comes from behind, telling his counterparts to chill out. The man walks forward, staring at his tablet, and to his surprise, he realizes that Ninomiya is the S-rank class stray hunter. The dude reveals that rumors have spread about Ninomiya because he's soloed a boss area. The dude is glad to have found Ninomiya, and he wastes no time making Ninomiya an offer. He tells him to join his squad so that they can work together because he can use his authority to complete his hunter registration right there and then. Ninomiya's eyes light up in excitement when he hears this because this is what he has been waiting for so many years. Surprisingly, Ninomiya refuses the offer, shocking the hunters. The team leader is confused, but at the same time he believes that Ninomiya has his reasons. The team leader lets Ninomiya know that he is free to act alone if that is what he wants. However, he lets him know that there are illegal hunters causing trouble in the Iwaya ward. Even though Ninomiya has run into people like this before, the way the dude said it still bothers him. This tells Ninomiya that he has to stay vigilant just in case things go south. After the hunters have left, Ninomiya tells Jin and Mimi that they are free to come out because it is safe. Jun then asks Ninomiya if he is sure that he made the right choice by not joining forces with the hunters who just left. Ninomiya replies that he is done trying to register as an official hunter. Basically, the world has gone to shit, and he is pretty sure none of that matters again. In addition, he is not ready to trust anyone with the way things are going. Ninomiya lets Jin know that he doesn't need the hunters because he already has his companions. He mentions that Jin and Mimi are the most reliable companions that he can ask for. This leaves Jin and Mimi blushing really hard. Moments later, they arrive at Iwaya Ward, and Ninomiya decides that he is going to scan the entire area before they make a move. Ninomiya activates his skill, and to his surprise, he finds something really weird in a marked location, leaving him to wonder what it might be. Tsukasa and his party head to Iwatani District, where they see an amusement park, and he confirms it's the place he saw with his trap scan, which bears the mysterious mark. This was the first time he had ever sensed a mysterious mark, and he felt it would be dangerous to leave it alone, which is why he had to deviate from his initial plan of going to the Western District to see Shiori. Even though Tsukasa hates detours, he makes up his mind to quickly get the whole amusement park issue over with so he can return to his original goal. As his party enters the park, Mimi makes a sound after sensing something unusual, so Tsukasa checks around and sees a weird object lying ahead. He approaches a pavement that warns everyone not to touch it because it houses a mighty destroyer that shattered even the greatest boulders. Curious, Tsukasa wonders what the destroyer is, but Jean tells him to be careful, noting that the device might be a catastrophe trap. These are rarer massive traps which are completely different from the usual, but the details are mostly unknown unless activated. On hearing this, Tsukasa is stunned because he never came across such a phrase despite searching through the entire Hunter Association library. Despite being so curious to know what it is, Tsukasa makes the right call not to touch the pavement because it's better not to find out the hard way while messing around. With that, they leave the vicinity and enter a dense forest while trying to cut their way through to the Western District. There, Tsukasa struggles to keep up and whines about how the trap maps do not specify the density of the forest. As they continue advancing, he sees a group of hunters trying to battle a monster, and he notes they are the Hunter Association squad. After observing their fight for a bit, Tsukasa realizes that they aren't coordinated, and because of that, he rushes in to help them to prevent the monster from wiping them out. All of a sudden, he sees a bright light dashing towards the monster, and when observed properly, it's a hunter charging at it with her sword at full speed. She swings her sword as soon as she reaches it, and the shockwave echoes through the entire forest. Jin worriedly asks for Tsukasa's safety, but Tsukasa has his eyes glued to the new hunter who has just arrived. The lady apologizes to the group of hunters for arriving late, who admire her strength, and she introduces herself as Tsumugi Asahina, an S-rank hunter who affiliates with the Hunter Association. She explains to them how she was searching for the sea boss, but when she spotted them, she decided to help. Tsukasa quietly observes Tsumugi and affirms that the attack she carried out wasn't ordinary. But once he hears her gathering a team to look and challenge the area boss with her, he notes she's naive since the more people of lower caliber are with her, the more the burden. As expected, the hunters immediately choose to follow her, but Jin learns firsthand that Tsukasa isn't ready to associate with them. Instead, they try to leave the forest, and while at it, they arrive at a riverbank, and Tsukasa notes they'll have a lot of valleys and rivers like that to cross. He then senses someone following him and calls out to it, saying he had been aware for a while. When the person refuses to come out, Tsukasa prepares to use his trap creation ability to smoke it out. Upon seeing Tsukasa ready to attack, the fellow comes out of hiding and begs Tsukasa not to kill him. He calls himself an ordinary civilian who was passing through the forest, so he begs Tsukasa not to turn him into monster food. At first, Tsukasa is confused, but when he sees Mimi right next to the man, everything clicks. So he calms the man and introduces himself as an independent hunter with some unusual companions. Upon learning that Tsukasa is a hunter, the dude heaves a sigh of relief before begging Tsukasa for help, saying that he got lost and needs some guidance to a safe place. Tsukasa thinks about it and notes that the detour would be a long one since he's in a hurry. But then he recalls that monsters often appear in the vicinity, so he makes up his mind to escort the geezer to meet with Tsumugi's crew. With that, Tsukasa tells the man to follow him and promises to hand him over to the Hunters Association. This makes the man happy as he rejoices that he can go home. but he bumps into Mimi, so the magic chest scares him. Tsukasa quickly intervenes and notes that walking around with the monsters will get him interrogated if spotted by the Hunters Association, so he tells Jean and Mimi to wait behind while he alone guides the man to the association. They obey him, and Tsukasa returns down the path as a guide into the forest. After walking for a while, the old man tries talking casually with him, but Tsukasa warns him not to let his guard down because a monster can attack out of the blue. Meanwhile, the geezer has other plans, and he feels that Tsukasa is the naive one for being fooled into thinking that monsters are the only problems to be wary of. He then attacks Tsukasa from behind, but Tsukasa knocks him out with a reflector blow, a counter-ambush fist from his arsenal. Tsukasa then reveals that he had expected the man to rebel because he was warned that there were illegal hunters in the area. Seeing that he's been had, the man shows Tsukasa that he has stolen the rare sword from him, and he claims he had taken it using his skill before being blown away earlier. He grabs the sword and says that his ability is to instantly search his opponent's equipment and steal the item with the highest rarity. Knowing that Tsukasa is powerful, the bandit believes that with the item he has secured a victory, so he dashes at Tsukasa with the sword but steps on a trap nearby. Immediately, thorned vines appear and entwine him, binding him from being able to move. Shocked at the instant development, the bandit yells at Tsukasa, asking him what he did, and Tsukasa explains that he didn't do anything, but the trap on the floor simply activated. Tsukasa then explains that he has deliberately knocked him in that direction since he knew there was a trap in that path. He reveals Trap Scan, one of his abilities, and then picks up the rare sword, before telling the geezer that he too can also use cheat skills. Now with the sword, Tsukasa tells the bandit that he hasn't even used the sword before, and if he'd like to be his test subject. The man immediately trembles and begs Tsukasa not to kill him. He then wagers his freedom for the hidden ultra-rare item in the area. Learning that such an item exists nearby, Tsukasa asks for more details. On a normal occasion, he wouldn't believe the bandit since he had already used his trap scan to check the area, but didn't sense such an item. Also, in most scenarios, rare items are always surrounded by traps which should be very easy for him to pick up. But because his scan skill can't pick up all items, just like the rare sword that was in the lake, suddenly, Jean appears behind Tsukasa, and once he sees her, she explains that she and Mimi had run as fast as they could after hearing the sounds of battle. Once she hears that the geezer is an illegal hunter, she tells Tsukasa to let her deal the death blow, and with one move, she pulls out her sword and goes for the bandit's throat, but the man quickly yells at her to wait and listen to him. While panicking, he tells them that he saw the clue to the hidden item when he was looking for a hunter to prey on. Back then, as he wandered in the ravine, the cliff rock in front of him started moving, and a huge rock-type monster appeared. Confused, Tsukasa asks him what the monster has to do with the hidden item, but the bandit yells at him, saying it's obvious that such a huge monster must be guarding the hidden item's location. Tsukasa analyzes the situation and assumes the bandit is reaching, and even Jeannie tells him it's a dangerous idea to follow such a bad person's advice. She also admits that hidden items' locations vary and sometimes exist in very simple places to outwit hunters. Upon hearing her out, Tsukasa chooses to go with what the bandit said, to try out their luck, and he also hopes it's an item to help them see Shiori. With that, he tells the bandit to lead the way, saying that he won't get rid of the restraints. All of a sudden, he hears a loud bang behind him, and in that instant, Tsumugi appears to cut him and the vines, but he evades it on time. As Jean runs to Tsukasa's side, Tsumugi accuses Tsukasa of being an illegal hunter who was rumored to stay in the vicinity. Tsukasa sees that she's been misinformed, but then notices the hunters from the association blocking John's path. As they try to fight the monsters, Tsukasa warns Jean to be careful, informing her that they've been misunderstood. Without wasting time, Tsumugi attacks Tsukasa, but his abrupt wooden shield appears and saves his head from being lopped off. Tsumugi pressures him, and after confirming that Jean and Mimi are Tsukasa's allies, she says there's no greater proof that he's evil. As Tsukasa wards her off, he tells her she has the wrong person, while the bandit who has been freed makes his leave. Jaina then asks Tsukasa if she's permitted to slay the hunters, and Tsumugi is surprised that Jean can talk. Tsukasa then orders Jean not to kill the hunters, but to take Mimi and escape. Immediately, she grabs the monster treasure chest and bolts away at an immense speed that Tsumugi's forces can't keep up with. Right after, Tsumugi breaks Tsukasa's shield, and he is pushed back. She then orders her men to surround him and worry less about the monsters because he is the ringleader. She calls out to him and commends him for letting his comrades escape, but tells him he's been ousted 4-1. To their surprise, Tsukasa corrects her notion by summoning the rare blade and telling her that he has let his comrades leave so that he can test the blade's power against so many. With that, he grabs the blade and says it's time to go wild with it. The other A-rank hunters believe Tsukasa is bluffing since it doesn't seem possible for him to take them on with such a short sword, so they charge at him, ignoring Tsumugi's orders, and Tsukasa uses his trap creation to create a pinball panic, and he throws the short sword at the objects. Like a ricochet, it slams into the hunters, throwing them off balance. Tsumugi sees Tsukasa's traps and notes that he isn't ordinary. Meanwhile, all her party members who got hit with Tsukasa's short sword fall to the ground and complain that their bodies are stinging. They observe their wounds and realize that they've been poisoned. Tsukasa retrieves the sword and learns that anyone who gets cut with it gets inflicted with status ailments. While he admires the sword and believes that the effect doesn't stop there, Tsumugi attacks him and sends his sword flying away. Her deal is to prevent him from harming her comrades any further, and she believes that deflecting the sword away will guarantee her victory. With the sword out of Tsukasa's hands, Tsukasa uses his trap creation ability to create a string, and he controls the sword with it, using it to strike Tsumugi from behind. She immediately thinks she's been poisoned, but then she checks her back and realizes that she got frostbitten, which meant it was an ice attack. Tsukasa immediately confirms that the short sword had changed its hue earlier when he touched it, which means that it can change the attribute of attack at will. Not willing to give up, Tsumugi announces she'll use her serious skill technique, so she closes her eyes to concentrate before firing off slash energy at Tsukasa. Multiple slashes fly at him quickly, and he finds a hard time trying to parry them with the short sword. As a result, the weapon flies out of his hands, and Tsumugi sends a slash to change its direction in her position. She then successfully grabs a hold of it and tells Tsukasa to surrender, but to her surprise, the sword turns into a twig and creates a cloud of fog, and in that instant, Tsukasa dashes at her and cuts her down, now that she had let down her guard. He then explains to her that the real sword had been in his hands all along, and his advice to her is not to close her eyes whenever she wants to use a technique against him because she had given him a chance to set traps. Tsumugi, as adamant, ever tries to fight him, insisting that it isn't over, but she falls to her feet and realizes that she can't move. So he tells her that she has been struck with a paralysis effect. He then advises her and her comrades to take a light recovery potion to heal from their wounds. Surprised, Tsumugi asks him why he's showing them mercy by refusing to finish them off, but he tells her that he has no intention of stealing nor finishing them, but he had to end the meaningless battle. He wakes up to her and tells her that he isn't an illegal hunter, and it's until then that she believes him. She then apologizes for the misunderstanding, and they put a lid on the matter. Suddenly the ground tremors, and they see a huge rocky monster charging their way. Once Tsukasa sees it, he wonders if it's the same monster the bandit had talked about earlier. Tsumugi then tells him that the monster is an area boss, and tells him it's the monster she and her team have been searching for. She shows him her sensor, which confirms it, calling it an illegal area boss. Out of the corner of his eyes, he spots the illegal hunter running off. Unfortunately, the monster also spots the man, so he strikes the ground, causing a great fault and causing the illegal hunter to trip and fall. Tsukasa immediately uses his warp portal to get to him, and he demands an explanation. After being threatened, the useless geezer confesses, just like he had said earlier about the monster being true. But this time around, he had gone to wake it up, wanting it to go on a rampage and pursue Tsukasa and his teammates, but he calculated wrongly because they hadn't chased after him, so in the end, he was the one who got pursued by the creature. Tsukasa gets mad at the man as he accuses him of knowing the monster was an area boss, but before he can continue with his interrogation, he notices the rock monster about to pound them, so Tsukasa leaps away to avoid the blow. During that period, Tsumugi tries to retreat with her men, but the monster spots them and tries to attack them. Thankfully, Tsukasa uses his trap creation spell to bonk a bucket in the monster's head, distracting and pissing it off. The monster sees him baiting it, and Tsumugi is shocked by his behavior. Tsukasa then runs off into the forest, and the monster pursues him. With things going according to his plan, he's happy that the injured hunters can quickly recover while he baits the monster away. While he runs off looking for a good place to fight it, elsewhere, Jean and Mimi relax by the riverbank. As Jean listens in and tells Mimi how she heard loud sounds like rocks collapsing earlier, the monster appears right in front of them, and they see Tsukasa holding on to it. As soon as Tsukasa spots his party members, he orders them to prepare for battle and join him in taking down the area boss because it's unavoidable, since the creature has locked onto him as its target. As Tsukasa wonders how to deal with the hardened body, multiple flying slashes strike the area boss, and Tsumugi and the other hunters show up. She calls Tsumugi by his name, and asks that they fight the monster together. Tsukasa is surprised to see them, but Tsumugi tells him that it's thanks to him that they were able to recover and are fully fit to fight. Realizing she knows his name, Tsukasa asks how, and she shows him his profile in the hunter's database, saying that he's the man who defeated area bosses solo. She apologizes for not realizing soon enough and introduces herself to him. Then her teammates inform her that the area boss wasn't affected by her slash attacks. Once she learns about it, she asks Tsukasa if he has a plan to take it down, since he is someone who can strategize a plan far stronger than anything they could come up with. With that, she asks him to lend them his wisdom, and they are willing to stake their lives on the fight. Surprised that they are ready to go that far despite knowing so little about him, Tsukasa wonders if Tsumugi is reckless or if she's very kind-hearted. He doesn't think too much about it since they finally have the manpower to take the monster down, so an idea pops into his mind. But before then, he asks them if they are willing to fight exactly as he commands, and once Tsumugi assures him, the other hunters have no choice but to follow their leader, so they tighten their grip around their weapons and prepare to set the trap that'll defeat the monster.